The very next thing on our agenda, and again, we'll have public comments afterwards. If there's anybody that still wants to make a comment, but the next section is school board discussion of policies. And I will let Mr. Wingate take that from here.
Thank you, Sam. So I'll try to be pretty brief. It's getting late, but I want to talk about three things: the process of these drafts, the intent behind them, and then to briefly describe the drafts. So earlier this year, we approved a new priority. We had last year we had 6 priorities, I believe, and we wordsmithed those and changed them a little bit. But we also added a 7th priority, a kind of new priority, and the board approved them in February or March timeframe. And that new priority was to promote partnership with families and the community through mutual respect, transparency, communication, and trust. And so the initiative and the sort of motivation behind these draft policies came from trying to realize that new priority. I wrote these drafts. I was not handed these drafts by any national organization, as someone said tonight. These are my ideas and thoughts, so it's not from any outside agency. I'm proposing them now in order to get input, just like as tonight we're getting from the entire Madison community. These are drafts only. We're not voting tonight. I am serious and truly committed to receiving input from the entire Madison community, from citizens, from taxpayers, from teachers, from counselors, from educators, from parents, from everybody involved. And so I am certainly committed to that. And that is, the way we're doing that is here. We are open to emails and conversations, and I've already had a lot of conversations about it, and so we're absolutely committed to those things. The school board will decide when we vote on these, if we vote on these things, when we vote on these things. And so we are absolutely committed to receiving input from everybody. I fully expect these will be amended, clarified, and improved through that process, that inclusive process before we vote. So please give us your thoughts. Tonight you're doing that, and it's a fantastic part of American democracy at work, and please continue to provide your thoughts to me and to the entire school board. My personal goal, the school board will decide when to vote if we vote. My personal hope is that we have it in place before the beginning of the next school year, so there's no rush in my mind at all, no rush at all on these things. And I've already received ideas that will make these drafts better, I'm sure. So that's the process. My intent really is to make sure that families know that the education of our child is parent-centric, and that we respect the rights of parents to train and care for and educate their children as Virginia law requires. I think the cornerstone or educational philosophy should be this quote from Virginia law that I'll quote now. This is Virginia Code 1-240-1. The quote is from Virginia law: "A parent has a fundamental right to make decisions concerning the upbringing, education, and care of the parent's child." I think that is the foundational philosophy that I certainly bring, and that I hope the board will bring to this. Secondarily, it's to help our schools focus on educational fundamentals and not be distracted by other things. My son will attend Madison High School next year. I want him and I want all Madison students to receive an excellent education on the fundamentals from our outstanding teachers and leaders. And these policies seek, in my mind, help us focus on that fundamental educational excellence. Third, my intent really is absolutely not in any way to slight, or somebody said tonight, to vilify our educators. I regret that kind of rhetoric. It's not helpful, I don't think. That is not my intent. I'm a high school teacher. I hold a license from the state of Virginia to teach public school, and I teach every day in a high school. I know very, very, very well the challenges that teachers face every day, especially come out of the pandemic. It is tremendously hard work, and I know the whole board joins me in this, is that value and respect and appreciate the tremendous work that teachers do and educators do day in and day out to our children. That awareness is why our board unanimously agreed in February to seek to equal or go beyond the average pay in Virginia for teachers. And we are committed to making that maybe to working towards that goal of paying our teachers so they make it as much as the average teacher makes or more in Virginia. That's a mark of our respect for our teachers here. It's my belief that nearly all of our teachers here already abide by these guidelines. I don't think our teachers need these guidelines very much, but they're in place to make sure that those who would go beyond the guidelines have been tempted to do that, to engage in inappropriate conversations or influence not to do so. This kind of guideline is not unusual for professions. I was in the Army for 23 years. There are guidelines in place what I can and cannot do. That's true for doctors, for lawyers, for everybody. So guidelines are not vilification, they are not slights, they are here to put in place standards for any profession, and that's what I think what I'm trying to do. The truth is, my intent is far more about preventing bad things happening here than correcting anything in Madison. I think Madison has done a fantastic job, and the superintendent and her staff and the teachers and educators here have done a fantastic job of avoiding a lot of the national and state controversies that have afflicted public education recently. But I don't think we can have our heads in the sand. Bad things are happening in school districts around our country and state that seek to deny the right of parents to make decisions for their children on the care, upbringing, and education, even around our state, and we know what counties are suffering those things. These drafts simply seek to keep those things away from Madison and our families and children. Okay, so that's my intent. I'll go quickly off the three policies. I don't know if I'll talk about each one. I don't know if Ms. Allen, if you want to talk about them at all in between, and I'll talk briefly about each one, and then if we want to talk, we certainly can. I'll pause after each one if there's any conversation from the board. So the first one we have, and by the way, these three policies are not new. These are all revisions. So we have these policies in place. These simply are proposed revisions. First one is a public information program. In keeping with my way I ran and to make this a parent-centric educational philosophy, I want to rename it Public and Parent Information Program. I just think in this crazy, fast-paced, busy, and digital age we live in, we have to be creative and proactive and organized and intentional if we're going to meet that goal of communicating with transparency with busy families. This policy update seeks to provide some organization and requirements for the district so that families and the community know what's being taught to children in a user-friendly way. I'm really happy that Ms. Graham and her staff are seeking to hire a new position that will help operate this program. So she's doing that now, and I think these policy guidelines, I hope, will offer guidance as the program is kind of revised and reinvigorated, particularly so that our website is easy to use and helpful for parents. Third and last, for this policy, this is not meant to be onerous. It's not meant to be looking over the shoulders of teachers in any way. All we want to do is make sure that we have an easy, user-friendly way so that the parents and the public can know what the children are being taught. And most of the work is already being done. I don't think it's going to be anything more for the teachers very much. I think it's more an administrative thing. So things like putting up course descriptions that are already written, curriculum links that are already there, resources used in classes we already know about, materials used to train teachers is easy. So all these things can increase transparency and trust in our county. Having up-to-date courses and calendars and handbooks and policies, just easy to find and easy to track. We're not trying to micromanage teachers in the classroom. I'm not looking to check their worksheets or their lesson plans for the day. Things like that is not what we're trying to do at all. We recognize the professionalism of the teachers. We want to increase the trust between them and the community. So that's really the purpose. And one more thing I'd say is, the other purpose is just to highlight the fantastic work that is being done. I think on special education work, that ought to be on our portal so the public and parents can see that fantastic work that goes on all the time in an easy way, and we can spread the good word that teachers and educators are doing in this county. So that's my purpose, to build that trust and rapport through this new revised policy. So I don't know, Ms. Allen, if you want to make any comments about that before I move on to the next one or not.
Sorry, I have something. If you'd like me to wait until you're done, that's fine, but
Go, Sam.
okay. So I just have a couple of things on my end. Some of the things that I'm going to mention just aren't clarified enough for me. Specifically, there was something mentioned about things being taught about sexual orientation and sexual identity only being included in classes that are labeled as family life education. I think it should be clarified exactly what classes those consist of, because I know that in anatomy and in the CNA class that I'm a part of, we've talked about things like that, and I just think that it should be clarified specifically what classes those, the family life education classes would include. My next point. I've heard through some of the public comments tonight a lot of mental health things, and speaking from a student's perspective, I see mental health problems in my friends, in my peers, and grown-ups and adults, I guess. Sorry, that's a little grown-ups, whatever. But I do think that mental health is a problem with, especially teenagers nowadays, with the certain demographics of teenagers. And something that I think should be clarified with policies or whatever, what exactly are teachers and guidance counselors being taught about mental health? And kind of how are they supposed to react when they hear of someone wanting to hurt themselves? Or, I've talked to guidance counselors before, and there's not really much on mental health except like 1 week out of the whole school year. That's like mental health week. And I just think that that should be clarified a little more, and what teachers are being taught about that, specifically how to respond to a child that may have that problem. And then my third final thing is, Mr. Wingate, you specifically say that a parental role is something that you strive to have in a child's education. And I've heard a couple of times parents saying that they wish that they had gotten questionnaires or certain surveys that are towards helping create these policies. And I heard also teachers, how teachers have impacted this. I don't know if you're just looking for like emails from certain parents, if they want to send you an email, but I think that that should be clarified as well, specifically how parents can interact with their students' education. Personally, I have a set of parents that are very involved in my education, I believe, and they want to see me succeed. And I think that that's a lot of parents here tonight. And again, like all of the teachers, they want to see their students succeed. So personally, I think that that should be a little bit more clarified in certain things. How exactly can parents and teachers help create these policies and help with their input in? That's all I have.
Thank you. Those all good comments, and that's why these are drafts, and we can try to make these better and better before we vote on them. So I just did the one, that was the public and parent information program. I think I'll answer some of your questions. I go to the other things, but from the board, any other thoughts on that public and parent information program draft?
I think that parents are, obviously from the crowd tonight, parents have a lot of input and things that they want to say. And I think to fail to take into consideration that we heard tonight that we are a public school with all kinds of different people, and everybody's voices should be heard. At some point, a decision does have to be made, but it certainly is. I think we are at a point right now that ideas are being thrown out, and we need to hear what everybody has to say. And that would include our professional staff, that would include our parents, and that would include people on the school board, people in the community. There's a lot of voices that I think probably have not spoken up, but maybe tonight was a little taste of the fact that there's a lot of ideas out there. So I think we should listen to a lot of those before we finalize anything. And I do want people to know that we're not in any hurry to do these. This is a beginning of a dialogue. So that's pretty much what I have to say. And I think that probably has already been said by Mr. Wingate, that this is a jumping off spot. It is not the final destination. So.
For my second draft, just to highlight some things, we already have a policy called teaching controversial issues. So some people were objecting to the term controversial. This is not my words, the policy we already have. In light of national, state, and local controversies recently, I think we ought to clarify what that means. That's the purpose of this policy. This revision seeks to ensure when discussing controversial materials, we do so in a spirit of impartiality and without seeking to influence children in any particular direction. It's good for students to discuss many controversial issues when done in an impartial manner. Someone said I wanted to shut down discussions about controversial issues. That's not true. This revision seeks to generate that, thinking about complicated and controversial topics, things like immigration or tax policies or even COVID restrictions in a fair and impartial way instills critical thinking skills that are very important to our children. However, in a few areas, those that are intensely personal, sensitive, and controversial, potentially lifelong consequences for students, this policy does seek to guide us to refrain from instruction with students at certain ages. In these areas, especially in areas of sexuality and gender, it's the parent's right and responsibility to discuss with their child, not the school's. It is not okay for educators to offer private opinions to sway children in a certain direction, any direction, or display slogans or flags or banners that seek to influence students on one partisan side on a controversial topic. That kind of influence is a parent's right and responsibility, not the school's. I do think, and the conversation tonight has been helpful, I do think there's room to improve this draft policy significantly by figuring out how to handle counseling in sensitive situations. And some of the comments that you made about counseling, I think, I think we need a conversation with professional counselors and talk about how what the law says and how we handle situations. There are, of course, situations where there may be a family abuse or other situations that we need to figure out and take into account. So I'm certainly committed to that. I think I'll also be open to allowing educators to discuss these topics in a private setting if parents want them to do so. Again, this is all about parental rights. If parents want that conversation to happen, by all means, I think it can and should happen with a teacher, but not without a teacher, not without a parent approving that. My whole purpose here is to safeguard parental rights. I have seen in other school divisions in Virginia where there was an intent to build a culture of secrecy between a student and the school against the parent. I've seen that firsthand. It has happened. I've been employed by a district where that happened, and I've experienced what that is like for a teacher. It's against Virginia law, I think. I know it's wrong and bad for everyone. Of course, when a child comes to a teacher and says, "Am I worth something?" Of course, the teacher should and can say, "You have inestimable worth. You are a child of God, regardless of race or sex or gender or anything. You are absolutely of tremendous value that cannot be measured, regardless of anything about you." And so this in no way restricts a teacher, any person, from reaching out and saying, of course you value greatly. So that charge is not untrue, I think. The school should never come between parents and children, I think. This policy also calls us to avoid explicit sexual content, strong profanity, or sacrilegious content and resources we use. I don't think anybody should want that in our classrooms. This is not banning books, as someone talked about. Parents have a right to have their children read anything they want to, and they should. That's a parent's right, and there can be books in the library and books anywhere, books on Amazon. You can find whatever book you want your children to read, and that is your right to have them do so. But it's not right for schools to force children to read something in a classroom environment that would be objectionable to those parents for religious beliefs, or because it's explicitly sexual content or things like that. Finally, this policy calls us to abide by the Governor's Executive Order Number 1 issued earlier this year to refrain from using the controversial critical race theory as defined by the order to train educators or to instruct students. This is not my definition of critical race theory. The definition of critical race theory is in the Governor's Executive Order, and that is what I would think we should all rely on, and not my personal opinion about critical race theory. This order does not seek to limit the teaching of history. It encourages the full study of the good and the bad in our history. It does limit the idea of a theory that describes our country today as a fundamentally racist country. I believe that's wrong because it's untrue, and because it makes it harder to promote love of country and respect for citizenship. So that is my second draft policy. I can go on to third if you wish. Okay. We're tiring everybody out. All right, my last one is about the curriculum and textbook adoption. If, as the law says, that parents have a primary responsibility to care for, train, and teach their children, then I think parents represented well in all aspects of the selection and adoption of teaching resources. Therefore, this policy calls for parents to be on the review and adoption committees from the beginning, along with administrators and teachers. It says we ought to have at least 2 administrators, 2 teachers, and 2 parents, with the superintendent and the board involved in approving the makeup of the committees. It calls for all candidate curriculums and textbooks to be reviewed thoroughly before adoption with clear and transparent timelines so everyone knows what's going on. And last, curriculum and textbook adoption should be a rigorous and transparent process. It's especially true today when our national educational establishment sometimes goes off the deep end of craziness in terms of their understanding what's okay for our children. Just recently, because of the language arts curriculum stuff, I've been reviewing lots of textbooks and researching lots of companies, and I think that the superintendent and the staff have done a good job of shielding Madison County from a lot of the stuff out there. But I will tell you, those companies, those textbook companies, think that there's some horrible stuff is okay for our children. And I don't know if there are children in the room or not. I won't talk about some of those things, but I was embarrassed when I showed my wife, when I sent them to Ms. Graham, I was embarrassed by the stuff that I was talking about. Some of these textbook companies are putting in textbooks for children. And if you're interested in knowing, I'm certainly going to talk to you if you're interested in knowing what that stuff is, but it is a disgrace, I think. And so I think we need to be careful about trusting these companies, and so we got to have a really full, thorough look at what's in textbooks and their merchandise that they're trying to sell us. I think that's everything. So I know one paper called these things sweeping. I don't think that it's true. I think that these are clarifications and establishing clear guidelines for what's already taking place most of the time in Madison schools because of the superb work of our educators and leaders is already taking place. And that's what I'm trying to establish.
One thing I did want to say about that as well, in my personal opinion, this is a policy that we probably do need to look at more than just what's here right now, and I hope that people will help us to figure out exactly what to do, because I think sometimes words get changed, and there's a difference between a textbook and what's in a textbook and what's in all the other material that they want to sell you, because a textbook, they're not in business not to make money. So they will come up with all kinds of other materials that they will add to it to hopefully sell to school systems that just buy everything because they can afford it. I don't know that we really can afford to buy all the things that they want to sell us. And I think being judicious about what we select is one thing, but I don't think that we should just say a textbook series is wrong because they have a particular novel that we don't agree with. I think we just don't buy that novel. We don't have that one. But we do need a textbook so that teachers will have something to use with the children that we all approve of and we think is good material. But what I would just caution everybody on is to look at everything, not just one thing. And when I went into the high school to look at the material, and the junior high, well, middle school too, there is so much material. And if we can't afford to buy it all, and we do need to be careful, but just because there's one novel associated with something does not necessarily mean it's right for Madison County, but we don't have to buy that part. So just so everybody knows that too. It is quite a arduous task to look at everything that these textbook companies want to sell you. It takes a lot of time. I'm not really sure whether a committee of people that we approve of, it's a lot of time. I spent hours looking at the books and really didn't look at all of them because I couldn't. So when we come up with a committee that we say we're going to give these people the authority to look at the books, I think we need to be very careful that people understand what they're committing to and that they don't have to buy everything. So this is the one that I hope we slow down a little bit and take a look at, because I don't want us to throw out something that the teachers need because there's something that we don't want. So, that's my opinion.
I'll just say there's a lot more than one book that we're talking about. There are many, many books that I'm talking about.
Well, I have had quite a few back and forths. We have looked at them, and I have looked at every one, and I agree with you. Some of them I wouldn't purchase either. But I also know that we've got to come up with something, and when we are looking at what the superintendent and our teachers are recommending, as far as just the stories in the textbook, I think that's a different cat than looking at all the other things that go with it too. But that is my opinion. But I do think our teachers need something. So these are just drafts, and we've got a long way to go, but I hope we can come up with something that is workable for everybody. And I guess we are ready for second public comment.
Actually, I was gonna pipe in for a second, if that's okay,
Okay?
Madam Chairman. As far as seeking teacher staff input, I'm imagining this will be on the June board meeting as well, under information again, so we have time to collect feedback. If it's okay, I would like to work with our admin team and our teachers to look at the policies and provide feedback from us. And then as far as parent input, would you like us at the schools to put out a survey? Is that something the board would like to do?
Whatever works better. As long as you get your input, I think